This is Herschel McWilliams, and welcome to another episode of the Swapping Fours podcast. LiveJazzKC, LiveJazzKC.com. You'll find us on all major podcast platforms: Google, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, you name it, we'll see you there. Welcome to Swapping Fours podcast. Okay, hey everybody, welcome to LiveJazzKC Presents the Swapping Fours podcast, and I hope all the sound just came through okay. But today I am super excited to have a wonderful saxophonist and educator and musician in general, and just a wonderful human being on the podcast today, Mr. Joel Gordon. How are you, Mr. Joel Gordon?
Hey, I'm doing well, Herschel. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Good. Now, I'm assuming you could hear the music that time on the little buffer music. Any guesses to who the tenor player might have been?
Oh man, I can't say I've heard that clip. It sounded at first almost Ben Webstery, but then he started playing outside, so it couldn't have been that. Okay, so tell me who it is.
It was Mr. Tavon Pennicott.
Okay, cool. I actually got to meet him one time at the Charlie Parker Festival. He's a great guy. That's awesome.
Fantastic. So, Joel, man, me and you have been in conversation here quite a bit lately, and I'm excited about a lot of things you've got going on, and you've been more than gracious to get involved with some of the things I have going on with LiveJazzKC, and so it's good to connect here and kind of talk about those things for sure. Now, just to the Reader's Digest version, I guess, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're from the Platte County area, Platte County High School area. And, but tell us like your journey from there, man.
Yeah. So I moved to Kansas City, Platte County area when I was 2 years old, and basically grew up there on Berry Road, kind of the thriving metropolis of the Northland, and started playing saxophone in middle school band like most kids, and was actually really into soccer when I was in high school. But both my freshman and sophomore years of high school, I got really bad knee injuries and actually ended up having to have surgery. And so I had all this time on my hands where I wasn't going to practice. So I got really into saxophone. And so kind of at that point, saxophone became a big interest. Tried not to major in music in college, but ended up majoring in music in college, and met my now wife through that. She's a pianist and teaches a lot of piano lessons and things. And out of that, have had various experience teaching public school, teaching private lessons, working with students at various levels, and also, like all of us, the DIY career of a jazz musician, trying to put together things with friends and other musicians in the area, and other students as well. And so, yes, now at about 3 decades here of life, have been a saxophonist about half of that. And so still enjoying the growth and potential that hopefully the next 3 decades will bring, learning how to play this instrument. So, yeah.
Well, you said it, man. There's always a learning process every single day. But, having had the fortunate experience to be able to hear you play, man, you're certainly killing it, and your students are turning out great. And so you've done some fantastic work in a short amount of time. So you have a lot to be proud of there. Now, you were teaching public school in the Platte County district, and then you moved away for a little while out of town, out of the Kansas City area specifically, a little north of here, I guess not too far. Talk a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah. So my wife and I volunteered for a youth organization when we were in college up at Truman State. And that's actually in Kirksville, where our previous job was, somewhere between a church youth group and a YMCA. And so a nonprofit for students in the area. And actually through that, got to spend some time working with the Kirksville High School band as well. And so got kind of the rural experience, if you will. They had about 100 kids in their band, and super nice band director, Brad Hudson, great experience there. So gave me kind of a view of growing up here in Kansas City, kind of metropolitan area, but also what it was like for kids to learn music, in a smaller area too. So that was a really valuable experience, and, had made a lot of great friends and memories through that as well. So, yeah.
Now, I know since you've been back, and prior to you even going, you were involved with youth jazz with Chris Burnett's organization, Youth Jazz, and kind of mentoring some of those students and those combos that he produces, and does a great job of creating music for and giving the kids a real professional level experience as musicians, it seems like. And I know you're still involved with that to some level, but something recently that you've started, and I'd love to talk about this because it's intriguing to me as a saxophonist, but you started a youth kind of honor saxophone ensemble based out of the Northland up in Liberty, but still encompasses the greater Kansas City area as a whole. Tell me a little bit about how that's going and what, how that came to be.
Yeah. So a few years ago, back when I was teaching public school full time, had a few really interested private students that, the kind of kids that you tell them to practice something and they take it home and they work on it and they bring it back and you're like, wow, it just makes teaching a lot of fun. And so a couple of those kids ended up making the Missouri All-State Band. And it just so happened that one of the kids that they sat next to was also from kind of the Northland area as well. And so 3 of the top, saxophone players in the state were all within about 20 minutes of each other. And so was kind of thinking about, we talked about, KMEA or MMEA, these 2 or 3 day experience where it's a lot of fun and, a very shaping experience for a lot of students that get to do that. But then that happens and you maybe never see those people again or, find them on social media. But as far as getting the chance to play with these really great musicians, that's, only 2 days out of the year, and maybe you get to do that a time or two if you're lucky or if it works out right. And so started to think about what if there was, some kind of saxophone studio or kind of shared program that, students could connect, and not necessarily through competition, but more so kind of through accountability, challenge each other to get better and, take on kind of higher levels of music or different rehearsal styles or different ways that they could kind of, share what they had learned with each other. And all, trying to do similar things of what does it look like to play music in college, or what does it look like to become a music teacher, or what does it look like, to pursue a path as a working musician. And so went through various, kind of offshoots of, how long does it take to start a nonprofit, and what kind of liability insurance do we have to have, and where would we rehearse, and how much money would they pay, and this all of a sudden became more than napkin math, right? That this would take a long time. We ended up moving away for a while, so nothing ever came to fruition. But I just kind of, put that in the back of my notebook as an idea for a rainy day, if it ever worked out. And so we moved back about a year ago. And after, a semester of kind of getting in touch with people, I started thinking about it again and was thinking about it over the summer. And I was like, okay, all the hoops that we'd have to jump through last time, how would, if I could have it perfectly, how would all of those things be taken care of? So I was Googling it a little bit and found a couple of other youth symphony organizations in the country. And there's not very many of these, just about 6 exclusive saxophone ensembles in the country, not directly affiliated with the school district. And most of them are affiliated with another type of nonprofit or youth symphony. And so since saxophones don't get to play in the symphony most of the time, they've gone and started their own ensemble. And so right there, kind of the fundraising aspect and the insurance aspect and, having a safe and secure environment for students to rehearse, a lot of those things were taken care of. And so I live up here in the Northland and had some connections to the Northland Symphony Orchestra, which here in town, we have 3 great youth orchestra organizations. There's the one with the Kansas City Symphony down in Olathe. They have a really strong youth symphony organization. And the one in the Northland is growing quite a bit too, as a lot of folks are moving up here. And so called them, took a meeting, kind of gave them my sales pitch. Had a baby in September, and 10 days later, I'm at their board meeting trying to tell them what my ideas are. I haven't slept for 5 days, and they were really interested, and they were willing to give us kind of a preliminary shot, and they wanted us actually to start in the spring semester instead of waiting till the next 4 school year. And so, we got really good response as far as student interest, and have had our first 3 rehearsals here in January. So we're up and running. So what was kind of, that dream, as music educators, we're always thinking about new opportunities for students, or, to help them have experiences where maybe we would have had one. Now it's happening, and it's a really exciting thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's precisely the same kind of motivation that I had with LiveJazzKC, specifically the high school all-star big band that put together, that you were so kind to come and sit in our rehearsal last week with us. And by the way, folks, this man is a wonderful director and an educator. Just seeing it in person with the kids, man, you did a wonderful job, and they really engaged with everything you were saying. So fine job there. But that's just the impetus is the same for what I did to give that experience. You know, like you said, your words to the kids were, this is the what if, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, what if we were able to get the best kids we could have in the city and put them together and give them all an opportunity to play with one another? What can happen? And we're starting to see that on our end, and I know that you are as well. So fantastic work with that. And now, is there a place where folks could go to find out more information about that, like for down the road?
Yeah, so we're, like I said, kind of under the umbrella of the Northland Symphony. And so just northlandsymphony.org has all the information. But we've launched our Facebook and Instagram pages, and we've taken the liking to the hashtag #KnowYoSaxos. And so there's a lot of like saxos hashtags that college saxophonists use. So we're the Northland Youth Saxophone #KnowYoSaxos. And so if you search that hashtag or that title, you can find things. But yeah, we're going to put a concert on here at the end of the semester. Just one concert, kind of, you know, an agile type methodology, if you will, to our first semester, 12 rehearsals and a concert, see how it goes, get some feedback. And our hopes, we're already in discussion, doing a side-by-side concert with UMKC next year, talking about what would it look like to play at some conferences, go to a NASA convention, something like that. And so we are scheming and plotting of where we want this thing to go. But as you know, Herschel, Kansas City has a great music education scene, and kind of having that leverage of both programs from Missouri and Kansas, I think really creates a lot of opportunity for students want to, you know, have that synergy to kind of push each other to get better. Maybe the kids that they don't see every day or get to see, you know, things more local to them. So we're really excited about that piece too, that we have 14 different high schools represented of kids from both Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. And so that kind of adds to the unique flavor that I think both, you know, the ensembles that we're talking about has as well. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I certainly wanted to talk about that because that's a uniquely Kansas City opportunity in many ways, being that we have such, like you say, a wonderful music education infrastructure built around everything that's going on, and so many people willing to take part and kind of mentor the young people and help, you know, guide their music pathways, so to speak. But now what I'd really like to know a little bit more about is you as a saxophonist. Like, take the teacher hat off. Like, you want to go just shred with some guys and you want to go play. And I know you've got your band, was it the Happy Habitat? Is that what you?
Yep.
Yeah. I love that name, man. I kind of wish I'd thought of that a long time ago, because being that my name starts with an H, the alliteration was perfect. But
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so your Happy Habitat. I mean, so talk a little bit about that, and like, where does the music come from, and how did that start, and who's a part of it?
Yeah, so when we first moved back to Kansas City a few years ago, you know, was kind of playing with various groups, and I've had guys that I've played with since college and, you know, doing standards gigs and things like that, but was kind of curious, you know, what would it be like to have my own band with my own name on it and write my own music? And so I was fortunate enough that Tim AuBuchon, who was my teacher at Truman State in college, was willing to kind of front a few gigs with me and make a few connections. And through him was able to meet, you know, Bill McCamey, who's also a Truman alum, and Brian Stever, who would come up a few times a year to Truman to teach some classes and stuff. And so kind of get connected with those guys. And out of that, you know, was kind of my catalyst to meet a lot of really great musicians in the Kansas City jazz scene. If somebody couldn't play that had been playing, you know, all of a sudden I was standing next to Stephen Martin, you know, listening to him play my tunes, and I was like, oh my gosh, you know, like, so that's what this can sound like, you know. And so each time, you know, a different person has touched the music, it just gets, you know, a new sense of understanding. And so in this past year, I've actually got to go to Chicago a few times. That's where my wife's family lives now, and play with some musicians up there, and just like I said, a whole different style and kind of a whole different way of communication. So it's been really cool to kind of put myself out there and do that. But upcoming, we're actually doing kind of a miniature jazz festival, if you will, at Park Hill High School here up north with a couple of the high school big bands in that district, and getting to play with Drew Williams, who's a composer here in town, as well as Brian Stever and Seth Lee, who, as you know, are two of the best guys around. And so, yes, I've been fortunate to kind of get to start to write my own music, to get to experience it with different people. At one point got to play with Adam Larson, when he was in town kind of touring before he moved here. And so, yeah, it's been a great opportunity to connect with people and, different venues and kind of different environments, and hopefully create something that, is accessible to whatever audience, kind of telling my story of how I got into music and what it's meant to me. And a lot of the tunes too are, kind of various memories of mentors or different pieces in my musical development as well. And so that's been a lot of fun. Kind of the happy memories or experiences, if you will, has contributed to the happy habitat name. So yeah.
Well, that's a perfect explanation. Now, as a musician or composer or saxophonist, where have you, can you point to anything in particular that maybe has given you the most inspiration or influence in terms of shaping your approach or your compositional techniques, or the things that I guess who were you influenced by early on, or maybe still?
Yeah. So when I was in middle school, I got an album from my grandfather that was Jerry Mulligan meets Johnny Hodges. And so Jerry Mulligan of kind of the cool jazz school, Johnny Hodges, lead alto player in the Duke Ellington band for many years. So kind of two very almost separate styles, but very complementary in the sense that they were, different enough that they, could kind of speak this harmonious language. And I probably listened to that CD nothing short of 400 times, when I was 13 or 14 years old. And so kind of this two-horn duo with the rhythm section in the back. And so part of kind of the happy habitat was the inspiration of that kind of two saxophone dialogue, if you will. And so a lot of kind of that Jerry Mulligan style of the laid back music, I really enjoyed. And so some of the music we play is in that style. Once I got into college, got really into kind of Matt Wilson and a little bit more of kind of the tongue-in-cheek and quirkiness to music. And so some of the tunes too are a bit comical and lighthearted, in the sense of, they're not completely conventional or not serious all the time. And so, yeah, has been a great outlet to think about, things conceptually, or things, like I said, kind of from a storytelling standpoint. As a composer, I wouldn't necessarily put myself in a particular bucket of, I try to write things that sound like from the post-bop era, or I try to write things that sound like a certain, stream of funk, but a lot of it is just kind of looking at, what's the story, what's the feel, and what's, a style of music that would fit that. So we play things that are a rumba, we play things that are a waltz, we play things that are standard swing, we play things that are a little bit of a grunge rock feel, so kind of a little bit of everything as far as what fits the story or the mood of the piece.
Yeah, well, that's perfect. And I have like a little clip pulled up.
Oh, cool.
That I was going to try to pull some audio from. I hope it comes through this okay. But it actually is from Westport Coffee House a few years ago when you featured Adam Larson on tenor, and you were looks like on alto on this particular track. So I'm going to take a second and just kind of start it from the beginning and play it for a while and see what happens, and just kind of get a listen. Is that cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right on. Yeah, man. That's Happy Habitat, man. Joel Gordon's Happy Habitat with Adam Larson, Seth Lee, and did you say it was Brian Stever on
Yeah,
drums?
Brian's playing drums. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't quite see him, but I thought that's what you'd said. Cool. Yeah. I was happy to find that clip. So you talked a little bit about being influenced early, with Jerry Mulligan in college. You expanded, you were kind of starting to talk a little bit about how maybe that shifted into your college time and as you move forward.
Yes, yeah. And so, you know, like many musicians, and was actually talking to my uncle who's an architect about this. You're kind of, you know, when you're in college, it's, you know, all these theoretical things and you're trying to apply them and take them through these different cycles and kind of drills, if you will, of, you know, what if I wrote a piece that's in, you know, 5/16 in this style, you know, and or what if I did this, you know. And so I think, you know, when I was in college, I was, you know, discovering all these various kind of streams of jazz, you know, much that were based in the language of bebop, but kind of contemporized of the last 50 to 75 years of music history, or, you know, lack thereof, kind of contemporary music. And so I think through that, yeah, I learned a lot about, you know, anything is possible under the sun, but also, you know, at some point kind of finding your voice, you know, and finding, you know, what you hear and what you're able to contribute. It's great, you know, when you're in college and as a young musician to study Bach, you know, and study Charlie Parker and kind of study the genesis of different styles of music, you know. But at some point you kind of look, what can I add and what can I say and what can I complement, you know, what's already been done. So I think, you know, out of that, studying a lot of the great musicians, but also discovering, you know, what else is out there, has really inspired, you know, some of those tunes and kind of the styles or flavors that they are. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because I just had a conversation with Eric Alexander yesterday on the previous podcast, but he mentioned something along those lines of, you know, kind of about finding your voice. And he says, look, anybody who's ever tried to find their voice never did, because it was already there. I mean, and somebody gave him the advice of, if you want to find yourself, your own sound, write a tune. And
Yeah.
I think that's what you're saying. Write a tune, because it's going to be centered around what you want to play or what you want to work on or play over or whatever, right? It's going to come from you. So that compositional aspect certainly brings through your unique point of view. I mean, musically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah. And, you know, but he kind of mentioned that anybody that ever went out looking for their own sound probably didn't find it. And they probably didn't sound that good to start with, but they just sort of happened.
Right. Yeah, I had a music professor in college that, you know, said if you ever kind of have writer's block, you know, in composition, try to write something really bad. And then kind of like you talked about your own voice, the gravitational pull will start to say, well, if I change this note, or if I, you know, if I change these chords, and, you know, everybody kind of has an inclination or kind of that, you know, unique identity. And so if you're trying to, you know, establish something, well, I would never write this, or I would never do that, you know, over time, you know, you kind of find enough critical or complementary nature to kind of find your way back home, you know, of this is me, this is what I can do, you know. And I think that that's such a great thing about the Kansas City jazz scene, is it's big enough of a town that I feel comfortable being one of 50 or 75 saxophone players and don't feel like I have to be, you know, the saxophone player that can do everything. That there are so many great guys to check out and listen to that. Yeah, I love what that does for the scene, you know, the camaraderie that builds, and just the opportunity it builds too, for things to stay fresh and things to stay live, as opposed to, you know, feeling like one person has to do everything, or one person has to, you know, encompass, you know, all the different ways to play. So that's an awesome thing about Kansas City.
Yeah, well, you know what? You touched on something that I was hoping to get to, which was the depth of the scene here as a musician in general, not much more specifically, even a jazz musician, or what have you, because there are so many. There's such a wealth of great players at every instrument, at every level, in every subgenre you can think of. You know, there's certainly guys who can do it, and being just a part of that greater scene yourself, you know, it's or speaking from my own point of view, it's nice because there's no animosity anywhere, and it's a pretty well receiving scene at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I think that's, one of the interesting things about when you go from town to town, maybe sometimes somebody says, do you know this person? And then there's some connection, but just the setup is totally different anywhere you go. And I think one of the great opportunities about Kansas City is there is a nucleus of a downtown scene, but there is also a lot of great kind of pockets, in the suburbs and kind of contributing areas as well. And so, yeah, there's enough space for people to do or be a part of, what they want or what they're able to. In addition to, there's enough, kind of work out there that you've got plenty of guys that are out there 6 nights a week, playing. And so it's cool that there's, people that are, focusing on one aspect of their career or another. But as far as, different types of work, it's cool to see a lot of people focused on education or, different performance opportunities or composition or kind of the arts network, arts administrative side. And so, it's a very, very cool kind of mid-sized Midwestern town that has a robust historical and still thriving jazz scene. So, yeah.
And what seems, and I'll kind of expand on that from my point of view, is it seems like it's a city where you're able to, with some legwork, fairly easily cultivate or curate your own scene, so to speak. I mean, where you can create opportunities for yourself if you're creative in how you approach, venues or creating a venue from something that maybe isn't necessarily, and turning it into something where it becomes part of the fabric of that place. And, we're lucky that Kansas City is so receptive as a whole. I mean, from business to business, you go, part of our brand here in town is the jazz history of the city, but it also bleeds into the fact that because the people know that, they're receptive to having some flexibility and maybe scheduling more of this stuff and giving a shot to some younger guys who are trying to get out and perform in front of people, but aren't ready to get to the club downtown or what have you. Right. It just makes more sense. So it's a blessing for sure. And, we're going to have even more of that. I mean, quite frankly, I would be thrilled if we had 7 more jazz clubs in town specifically to, focused on the music every night of the week, and every, maybe not all straight ahead bebop, but maybe different types of clubs or what have you, from a different approach, like Chicago's got a number of venues for live jazz and they all have their own little niche in some regard. Right. Sure. And so, and it's getting more and more that way. And I see it only continuing to grow, assuming it's fed and handled with care by the people, in the scene now. I know that the airport, for instance, is going to be featuring a lot of live jazz at the new airport when the new terminal opens here very soon.
That's awesome. Yeah. I knew that the American Jazz Museum I've flown in a couple times, and there's been, a trio there, have guys, Matt Hopper's playing guitar by the baggage claim or something. Like, oh, cool, this is great. So I'm glad that they're bringing some of that stuff back. Kind of welcome to Kansas City. It's part of our culture.
When I used to travel for work a lot, I would schedule my flights back into town around when I knew they were going to be playing there, just so I could stop and go check out whoever's hanging out at the baggage return at the Southwest. But now they're going to have an actual stage in the new terminal, and with some restaurant type venues that are going in. Like Soiree and Anything Divine is going to have a location at the airport with live music as well, and just to name one. But so now, what is kind of your vision moving forward? Like we're already kind of talking about how we cultivate this stuff and how the scene has been so welcoming to pretty much everyone, but how can we continue to grow our footprint here in Kansas City and really start to expand, in your opinion, the people's awareness of what we have going on in Kansas City to a national or international level? Because I think ultimately my goal with what I do with this and everything is to grow or expand our reach. And, I think that that's a big part of how we continue to facilitate these programs and make things bigger and get kids involved. And naturally the young people are a big part of it. But what do you see as in terms of like shaping for the future?
Yeah, in terms of, kind of the stewardship of jazz, it's a very, delicate thing. If we all stop playing for 2 or 3 years, all the venues, jazz isn't popular, I guess, anymore. And I think it could happen quicker than we realize as far as, the actual support and labor that goes into the jazz scene in Kansas City. And so, in terms of keeping that, a lot of it starts with the youth and starts with kind of the next generation. And a lot of what Chris Burnett and I talked about in starting youth jazz, and you have kind of a similar sentiment, and all the things through LiveJazzKC and their education ventures and things that I'm doing, up here up north, is it's not necessarily to make an AAU basketball team, that it's all about, the next kid that gets a sneaker deal or the next kid that signs in the NBA and saying, oh, we did that, that was all us and patting ourselves. It's all about the exposure and, creating an experience from, inspired by the experience that we had, because every jazz musician has a mentor at some point. None of us live on an island or in a bubble that we, just listened to a couple tapes and figured it out ourselves. I think we could all, quickly name 5 folks that were really, instrumental boots on the ground as far as helping us get going and, learning what we do. And so it all starts with, kind of the desire to share and give back. And I think, the authenticity out of that is where we'll create a lot of momentum. And just, recently had a student, get a full ride scholarship to study jazz down at the University of Miami, a saxophone player. Shout out to Andreas, if you're listening to this. And he's going to be the next big thing, in a couple years before that, you have Evan Kappelman, and a couple years before that, you have, Matt Chalk. And so these guys that are these great up and coming, saxophone players, I think they would all say that they benefited from somebody that was, 10 plus years older saying, hey, come check this out with me, not this is what you should do, and this is what you should do, and this is what you should do. So come check this out with me. So I got to take a couple of sophomores in high school to see Eric Marienthal, a couple months ago. And that was the first time they had ever seen a professional big band in their life, and so taking people along with you and saying, hey, this is what's, this is the real deal, and check this out, and this is cool, and go listen to this. And we got to sit courtside, to Brett Jackson there with, the Boulevard Big Band to hear Eric Marienthal. And so for them, it was such this cool experience, and they went back to school and told their friends about it. And so I think, the big thing in Kansas City that we need to be stewards of is bringing people with us, and saying, I love this music. I love what music has done for me and the connections that it's made. I'd love for you to join me, and not everybody's going to become a professional musician. Not everybody's going to become an executive director of the American Jazz Museum, if you will. But I think the relationship that Kansas City has with music is super intimate, and that we do have, that jazz vein. We have a great classical music scene, a lot of great, rock and contemporary bands as well. And so, the encouragement to anybody listening is, our efforts are to create things to bring students with us, because it meant so much to us that we want to share it with them. And I think, like I said, if we have that authenticity, that's going to be unique, and that's going to really take people places like Andreas, that had great mentors, and Chris Burnett and Dan Thomas, and people, that he could go to that were really subject matter experts, and has got him, this far. And so I look forward to more of that as we, seek to provide more of these opportunities for students, kind of what are the days of, here's what you should do and here's what you should do, and just telling people the way it is. But I think kids get really motivated by kind of coming alongside them and helping point them in the direction of what means a lot to us. And so, excited to see, where the different jazz organizations go around town that have great leadership now, as well as Clarence, down at the Jazz Museum, just different organizations. And like I said, be it youth symphony or kind of extra things that encourage kids to get together. And, the directors are there to kind of give them, guidance in the right direction, as opposed to tell them everything they're doing wrong, And so, super excited by by the people we have and the programs we have. Just that's a huge encouragement to students and kind of gives them that guidance, like I said, in the right direction. Yeah, great question.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think you said it when you say bring someone with you. And I think you can even expand that to, you don't have to bring, I mean, it's great to bring the kids and show, and I want to take my boys and my daughter to go here, but they're the age where I'm just now maybe starting to get them to like even listen with me, but
Sure.
I'm not, but soon enough, I was about middle school when I started really listening and letting go with my dad to go hear the Boulevard Big Band play at the Plaza 3 Steakhouse back in the day. And but also, if we're talking about continuing the health of the scene in general, I think that can also be expanded to invite people to come out to support live jazz musicians in the venues, because it's really easy to say, oh, I love jazz music and I support the jazz musicians, but they're not going out to go to the club and buy a drink and go maybe have a meal at the restaurant while the musicians are playing and doing those sorts of things. And there's so much value in that. And I encourage anyone listening or otherwise to, if you want to be a supporter of this art form, go experience it in person as often as possible. And there's certainly opportunities at all times of day, at all days of the week, from 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning till 1:30 in the morning on Saturday night. You can go somewhere and hear music played. And I know that's not a problem, but it can be a little bit of a hindrance when it's all, a lot of late stuff, but we're lucky enough to have an opportunity almost all the time. And if you ever want to see it, plug myself at LiveJazzKC.com. We have a calendar perpetually of all the live jazz opportunities in Kansas City that we're made aware of. Disclaimer, because sometimes we aren't made aware of everything, but we try. Yeah. So, but yeah, get out and support people. I mean, I know I hate going to a gig and going to someone's performance and feeling like the only people there supporting them are a handful of other musicians. And
right. Yes.
And while that's great, and I'm glad we support each other, I think that's where we invite our neighbor or our in-laws or whomever, right, and to come in and experience it with you, because that's how we get sustained health and success in the venues. So yeah, good point. Bring someone with you, invite someone, share what you're doing, and just get out and support the venues and musicians in person. To me, is a healthy recipe for success long term.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, gosh, time flies, and we've been doing this for a while now, but I'll just like to ask a couple fun questions once in a while that are off the music subject, right? But still Kansas City related. So first and most important question I'm going to ask you, Joel, is if you had to go to one barbecue restaurant in Kansas City and eat one dish, where would it be and what would it be?
Oh man, this one's a bit of a resurrection. So I grew up at KC Masterpiece home. So if I could get some burn-ins from KC Masterpiece right now, that'd be amazing. But I don't know, you probably know better than I do. That closed, 5 or 8 years ago. So that's probably my favorite of all time, as growing up as a kid in Kansas City. But yeah, it's just a memory now. So if I could have my wish, that would be it. So
that's a fine answer. I think the last time I ate at a KC Masterpiece restaurant was my brother's wedding rehearsal dinner, which was in 2003. Yep.
Yeah. No, those are good memories, but things of the past. So, yeah.
Second question. Downtown stadium for the Royals, or keep them where they're at?
Oh man, I have probably been to at least 50 Royals games at Kauffman Stadium, so it'd be hard to see it move. But now working downtown, would be very excited to kind of add that element. I heard the other day that there are only 60,000 public parking spots in downtown Kansas City. So adding a 30 to 40,000 person stadium could make things very interesting as far as traffic flow. But I think that might be an exciting problem for the city. So I say let's do it. Let's try it.
I'm on your side. And I had another one I was thinking of. Oh, so first of all, you have any pets?
We don't have pets. We just have kids. So that's enough.
You can have all of those things, Joel. I have 4 kids. We have 2 dogs, a bearded dragon, and some fish, a couple turtles. And
Okay.
I think we're done, but certainly there's room. There's room. So
Maybe
no
we'll
pets.
Yeah, maybe we'll start with the turtle.
Well, I have 2 turtles. Come take them. So lastly, this is music related. You have one go-to album that you're going to listen to. What's your stranded island album that you have all to yourself for the forever, and that's the one thing you have to listen to from now on?
Oh yeah, Dexter Gordon, Go. Yeah, I've probably listened to that umpteenth times. That was one that I transcribed and listened to a lot in my teens and 20s, and then bought it on vinyl and then download, so if at any time, can break it out of a case in my car, that's my go-to. Dexter Gordon, Go.
That might very well have been the answer I would have gotten from Eric Alexander had I asked him that question, but I neglected to, because he's certainly of that influence for sure.
Yeah.
Well, man, thanks so much for taking some time to do this with me this evening. I'm going to get this posted right away. So, feel free to share it, but man, please come back and let's do this again sometime and check in on things later down the road. Yeah,
that'd be great. Let's stay in touch. I'm excited to hear how the big band does in their first performance this year. And I'll make a point to come down again and stay in touch. And a lot of great things to come for that group, it sounds like. So awesome. Herschel, thanks so much, and appreciate you thinking of me and taking the time. I know we're both putting kids to bed and everything, but to during the week and to continue to promote the music scene in Kansas City. So that's awesome.
Man, no problem. And I'm going to take us out here with a little bit more of your recording from the Westport Coffee House. Is that okay with you?
Awesome.
All right, man. Well, hey, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Herschel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. So there it was. That was a little bit more of that. So thanks again, Joel. We'll talk to you real soon, my friend.
Thanks, Herschel.
All right. Have a good one.
See ya.
This has been a LiveJazzKC production of the Swapping Force podcast, livejazzkc.com.